Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Ridgecrest City Council. We'll go ahead and call our meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. with our roll call.
Mayor Bruin,
Here.
Mr. Blades.
Present.
Mr. Heyman,
Present.
Mr. Gorman. Present. We have 4 present with Mr. Rajaratnam absent tonight.
Okay, next is our approval of our agenda. Our agenda has been presented as record. Is there any changes or amendments to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and second. Roll call.
I'm out of my norm. Skip said something. He approved one. I say with respect, sir. Mayor Bruin,
Aye.
Mr. Blades.
Aye.
Mr. Heyman.
Aye.
Mr. Gorman.
Aye.
4 ayes, motion carries.
We have one item in our closed session, and this is the opportunity for public comment on our closed session. Our closed session this evening will be a conference with legal counsel regarding potential litigation under Government Code 54956.9. Is there any public comment on the closed session item? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn into closed session. We'll be back for our regular session at 6 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to go ahead and call our session back in order from our closed session. If I can ask everyone to go ahead and please join me in standing for our Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Scott. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My apologies. Normally, Councilman Rajaratnam leads us in the invocation. Would one of my fellow council members like to lead it?
No, but I'll just say that everybody, whatever your religion, I'm personally a Christian, but maybe we can just take a moment of silence and say prayer yourself.
Thank you for that. Okay, next item on our agenda this evening is our attorney's report out of closed session. Martin?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council Member. One item was discussed in closed session by the council, and on a unanimous 4-0 vote, the council rejected the claim filed by Mason.
Fantastic. Okay, we have a few presentations this morning. I hope you'll entertain us. If I can ask our council to join me at the podium.
You're welcome to just come on up and be here with me on this. So it is my pleasure to introduce the proclamation honoring Constitution Week. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law. And whereas it is the privilege and duty of the American people to commemorate the 236th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America with appropriate ceremonies and activities. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the Ridgecrest City Council does hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd, 2023 as Constitution Week, and urge all citizens to study the Constitution and reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and responsibilities with that privilege involves. Proclaim this 4th day of October 2023, Mayor Eric Bruin, myself, Mr. Solomon Rajaratnam, Mr. Heyman, and Mr. Gorman. Thank you.
The members of the DAR chapter Panamint Springs, thank you, Mayor and the City Council, for helping us celebrate Constitution Week and for honoring the most important document in our history. Members of the DAR petitioned Congress to set aside the week of September 17th to 23rd in 1955. On August 2nd, 1956, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed Constitution Week into law. In his first proclamation, Eisenhower stated, "I urge the people of the United States to observe the week with appropriate ceremonies and activities in their schools and churches and in other suitable places so they may manifest their gratitude for the historic week of September 1787, during which our Constitution was signed, delivered to the Continental Congress, and made known to the people." 60 years later, President Obama stated in his Constitution Week proclamation, "Signed on September 17th, the Constitution of the United States has steered our country through ever-changing times. It guides us as leaders on the world stage and safeguards the fundamental rights of our citizens. And it guarantees the greatness of our nation never depends on any one person. It requires the full and active participation of an engaged and vibrant citizenry." Thank you so much, and we have a Constitution display out in the hallway with some constitutions on it if you need to read it and remember it. Thanks.
Our second presentation this evening, I get to present yet again. One of the things that I said when I got into the role of mayor was that I always wanted to make sure that we went back and we recognized those people that give such dedicated service to this community, and we started the Key to the City program. And again, the purpose of the Key to the City is not about recognizing just individuals that we may know, but especially those that continue to go above and beyond from a volunteerism perspective to make the lives of our community better. And this year I had the opportunity, once again, as I mentioned earlier, to return to the Star Follies program. And there has always been, if there's a mama bear in Janice Bottroff, then there's a daddy bear in Daryl Eddings. And Daryl Eddings has done far more than just dance on the stage and entertain men and women from this community for the last 20 plus years. But more importantly, the man has continued to dedicate his life and his service to making Ridgecrest as great of a community as possible. 20 years ago, it was on the football field. He coached our Bros team for many, many years. And over the last decade, it's been at the Desert Empire Fairgrounds, where him and Mr. Holloway have worked hand in hand to rebuild and bring back our Desert Empire Fair as great as it has been. You'll see him on his cart tirelessly there every single day during the fair. If you ask him to go find toilet paper, he'll find toilet paper. If you ask him to go sweep something up, he'll sweep it up. The man is willing to do anything or to take on any task as long as it makes people's lives better. And that's what he's done throughout his life and his services community. And so what happened was he came to me, and it was very fun, and I still remember it, and he came to me and he says, "I'm having my it was your 60th birthday party, right? 70th. Oh, jeez. I want to make you younger than you are, my friend. His 70th birthday party, he says, "You got to be there." And I said, "I'll be there." And of course, it's the same time I'm doing Cub Scouting, and I'm outside Cub Scouting one. He's having his party in the fair hall. I come in and I say, "I'm there to take care of you." And I said, "I promise you I'll make sure that we do this right at council." And today is my opportunity to make sure that I do that right by recognizing Daryl for all of his years of service. He's an interesting candidate because he has received a Key to the City previously. But again, when we submit these, we don't look back on whether they've received it before. We look back as, why do we think they're deserving now? And the man on his 70th birthday comes in and he reminds me of all the things that makes Ridgecrest great, which is that spirit of giving that makes our community continuously what we are as a group. Not as individuals, and especially, man alive, if we've ever seen how individuals can corrupt a community in the last 48 hours, we've seen it. But he's been somebody who's constantly been dedicated to this community. So it's my honor to present on behalf of the Ridgecrest City Council an honorary Key to the City, once again, to my good friend, Mr. Daryl Eddings, the chairman of the board for the Desert Empire Fairgrounds. And often the most well-dressed man in the room. Thank you, my friend. We're doing the Follies dance.
Yes.
Yeah. They always do that too. Okay, now we're gonna try one more time. Without the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything? You better thank one person before you walk out of here, or it ain't gonna be a good night for you.
Thank you, Ms. Sorrell Edens. My wife of 48 years. I want to thank this community. I've been here since 74. Almost 50 years. We're pretty close. I have never been loved more by a community than this one. I've always said, because I've been in so many organizations, that the letters IWV mean I will volunteer. I know it means Indian Wells Valley. Don't get me wrong. I love Indian Wells Valley, but I have volunteered for every organization you can possibly name in this community, from Boys and Girls Club to the Chamber Ambassador. I was elected a couple times to the Chamber Board. I'm currently serving with Mr. Holloway out at the fairgrounds as the president. I just love Ridgecrest. I love our people. My family was here for my birthday, and I promised my mom that my mayor would come. She's like, your mayor? Well, she's been here several times. One time she came to our house, and Mr. Holloway was the mayor. And she was so impressed that the mayor actually came to my home. And when he came the other night, or a couple months ago, to my birthday party, and I said to my mom, he's the mayor. You know the mayor? It's like I never knew the mayor before, but this guy right here, he's awesome. I love you, Ridgecrest. Thank you very much. I have a spot on my wall for this. If I don't, I will make one. Thank you very much.
The last piece, none of them are present, so we're just covering them from the dais. I just want to make sure I explain. So as you may have heard me say, but just for clarification, so we have, we present our employee service awards for the employees as they reach, well, in some cases, legendary levels of service. And we have an opportunity to recognize those. Unfortunately, none of those employees were able to be here with us this evening. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them off so I can recognize them. Eric Hallmark with our Ridgecrest Police Department has just completed 5 years of service to the community. Jason Arnold, also with the Police Department, has completed 5 years of service. Nicholas Castillo with our Parks and Recreation Department has completed 5 years of service. And then we did get a chance to present to this. You may have heard of her, you may not have heard of her, but if you've ever had an animal in town, you know her. And that is the incredible Mary Stage, reached her 35th year of service with the city of Ridgecrest. And I cannot say enough about Mary and the number of families that woman has touched through that animal shelter is innumerable. And she has been an incredible influence, similar like Mr. Eddings in terms of being so giving to this community. And we thank Mary for all of her years of service. If I could just have a round of applause for all of them. Thank you for your service to this community. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next regular schedule item, which is public comment of items not on the agenda. Persons wishing to address the council on matters that are within the council's jurisdiction and do not already appear on the agenda may do so at this time. Council will not respond to any public comments, but may provide direction to staff to collect information. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council may not act on any item that does not appear on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes, and the public comment section of the agenda is limited to 1 hour. Each speaker is asked to provide his or her name, and I'll go ahead and begin with any public comment from the floor.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
There we go.
My name is Petty Officer Ortiz. Here I have Petty Officer Wolf with me and Petty Officer Swig. We are part of the Navy Ball Committee for the year of 2023, and we are here to formally invite you, Mr. Mayor, the City Council, and the City of Ridgecrest to this year's event. It'll be on October 20th here in the Kerr McGee Center. Tickets are open for purchase, and we will have more to come. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Let me just say thank you to you guys. Cap and Skipper has informed us on how much effort you guys are putting into it. So let me be very clear. Thank you for making the efforts to make sure the Navy Ball comes back out into the community and that we can celebrate. So I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment from the floor?
Good evening, Council. Tom Wicknick. And a month ago, I came up here and listed 10 questions about how we were going to implement and use Placer AI. And during my presentation of the questions, I noticed nobody took notes while I was doing it. So the next day, I emailed out the list of questions, of 10 of them, to all of you, including the city manager. And I'm now here tonight. Haven't heard the answers yet. I was wondering when I'm going to get answers.
They'll respond to that during the council announcements and directions section. Just the next section, so just have a seat and they'll respond after everybody else does their.
Okay, you didn't start the clock yet, by the way.
I didn't think you were going to be more than 5 minutes, sorry.
It's okay. Okay, well, I hope I do get the answer to those, and because they are very important questions, and I would hope that we get the answers to those questions. But just in case I don't get an answer to all of them, I'll read them all one more time. In implementing the use of Placer AI and its capabilities, I ask these questions. 1, who will have access to any Placer AI provided research? 2, will any individual be able to request a report without approval from the city manager? Will any business or private organization be able to request a report? Who will set surveillance criteria? Will the general public have access to the system or be able to request a report? Will any staff be able to request a report without city manager approval? Will public be notified when the city initiates a surveillance study? Will individual businesses ever be studied without their knowledge? Will the council be provided study info in a public meeting, establishing a public record of all studies? Will it be used for any political campaigns or other political reasons? So those are my 10 questions again for the record, and I hope and what you say in the council comment, we will get an answer to those questions. Because you all talk about transparency, and you made a big issue of having this discussion about Placer AI at least three or four meetings in the interest of transparency. So I would hope you consider and continue your goal of transparency and answer these questions. After I asked these questions, the News Review did an article about me. I don't know if the DI did or not. But I was approached by numerous people as I went around town thanking me for asking those questions. Because they said those questions were important to be heard from the council on what they're going to do. Of course, I ran into people at post office, Walmart, and they had additional questions, but I did not bring those. But it does have a lot of interest, and the people are curious on the answer to these questions. So with that, I will stop talking. It's a little over 2 minutes left.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other public comment from the audience?
You start the clock. I wasn't planning on talking, but my president gave me orders before he walked out the door and said I had to talk, and I realized the next council meeting is October 18th, and I'll probably be up to my elbows in problems. So I wanted to officially come down and, 1, thank the city of Ridgecrest for sponsoring the fair and the Tunnel for Towers exhibit that's coming to the fair, and 2, invite the entire council and city staff and everyone in the community to our fair October 20th through 22nd. It's looking like it's going to be packed, and we're really excited. You know, one of the tenets of the fair is education. Our junior livestock program is completely sold out. They can't even take any entries at this point. It's probably the biggest livestock show in the history of the fairgrounds, and that's saying something because, frankly, Ridgecrest is not a livestock community, although me and Kyle are trying to change that a little bit. But we're really excited because the Tunnel to Towers 9/11 mobile exhibit will be coming to the fairgrounds this year. And I've been trying to get that to the fair. Well, I was never trying to get it to fairgrounds, quite frankly, but I saw it at my very first fair convention in 2015 in Las Vegas. And they explained to me they're based in Connecticut and they, rarely come to the West Coast. And I'd see them every other year at different conferences. And just so happened I went to a conference last year in Indianapolis and they saw me and they screamed across the room, "Hey, Chip, we're coming to the West Coast." Just so I wanted them here for the Parade of 1,000 Flags. That was my goal. But the only days they were available was at the fair. And I said, well, heck, that's the second best thing. So, and they just informed Carrie, and I spoke with their publicist and their organizer on Friday that this is only the third time that they've been out to the West Coast. So we're hoping to attract people from all over the region to not only see the exhibit, but actually see the city of Ridgecrest if we can get the right word out there. And then I'm going to leave it to the mayor. He's going to talk about a very special thing we're going to try to do as the exhibit comes into town, which will be on October 18th, which is Wednesday afternoon. We think they're going to, this is all subject to change, and pay attention to Facebook because Carrie will keep you up to speed on this. But we literally have folks that are going to meet the exhibit at Kramer Junction and escort all the way from Kramer Junction into the city of Ridgecrest, right to the front gate of the fairgrounds. And it'd be really cool. I don't know if we still got a bunch of flags laying around from the 1,000 Flags. If we could line the streets of Ridgecrest with some flags as that exhibit comes into the community. And I think it will give us some video footage from some moments we can use for our community for years to come. And I just invite everybody, especially people that have young kids that they have no knowledge of the impact that 9/11 had on most of us that day. And it's only a footnote in history at this point for some of those kids. But this is going to be a real exhibit with real artifacts. It's over 1,100 square feet. They're flying in 4 first responders who were actually on site that day, so they will give the tours. So it's the real deal. And if you've seen the commercials on TV where Mark Wahlberg is in an exhibit and he's talking to the Tunnel for Towers founder, that's the very same exhibit that's coming to Ridgecrest. So we're excited. And we're also excited about the fair. Plenty to eat, plenty to do, plenty to see. We're going to have a rodeo on Saturday night, our second annual Roundup Rodeo, and of course our Demo Derby. And if you got any spare change, get out to that Junior Livestock Show since they have so many entries, 4 o'clock on Saturday. Help these kids get the money back so they can raise the next animals for next year so we can expand that livestock show and give these kids something great to do and something to teach them some pretty good habits. So with that, thank you guys.
Mr. Holloway, clarifying question. So you said it's coming in on Wednesday. When are people going to be able to see it?
They won't be able to see it until Friday night from 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And check the fair schedule because the exhibit's restricted to 8 hours a day. So don't assume just because the fair's open, the exhibit will be open. We're only allowed to keep it open because those guys have work requirements. So it's only going to be open 8 hours a day of the fair. I think we've got it 2 to 10 on Saturday right now, and probably 1 to 9 on Sunday. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment from the floor?
Good evening, Mayor Eric Bruin and City Council. I am Troy Charles Frazier. Let's talk a little bit about the streets. Everywhere you look around, looks like there's new streets coming in, new pavement. I'd really like my Ranger Street repaved, but more importantly, the most dangerous street in Ridgecrest is going to the dump on Bowman. If we can just widen that by 1 lane in less than a mile, it'd be a lot safer. And then next thing I propose an ordinance or a law for Ridgecrest that we do not throw away food in our trash. It comes back to haunt us with flies and other problems. I put all my food waste in a blender and down the toilet. And on the bright side, I'm diligently working on a patent and a project to spin a shaft, which is for an alternator or generator of a power plant, and revolutionize America with better, affordable, renewable, clean electricity. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other public comment from the floor? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the phones? I'm going to give it just a moment. The phone number should be on the bottom of the screen as well. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back. Thank you very much for all the comments. We'll go ahead and move on with our next section, which is council announcements and direction. The only thing I wanted to real quickly was to go ahead and add a few more details for Mr. Holloway and for Mr. Frazier. I believe the portion of road that you're speaking of most likely is county maintained. Because our border hits at Bowman and Mahan, if I'm correct. And so from Mahan to the dump would be county. I will be happy to forward your comments to Supervisor Peters and let them know your concerns as well on that road. Okay, sir? And then for the tunnels and towers, Mr. Holloway was mentioning the escort. The escort is on the 18th, and we're also hoping to do to get students to the exhibit, working with SSUSD on the 19th, and also just a small welcome to Ridgecrest presentation. We're hoping to be able to do that on the 19th. And the Tunnels for Towers, as he mentioned, it's a once in a community opportunity. That's what I'm calling it. It's only been on the West Coast 3 times. The fact that we're able to bring it here is largely based on the level of commitment this town has continued to show towards 9/11 and never forgetting. And I thank the entire fairgrounds for working so hard to make sure it's here and the sponsors that put that together. So we'll have some more information on that in the future. Are there any other council comments or announcements?
I will. October glows like the candle on a Christmas tree among all the other months of the year around here because, well, the weather's amenable for almost anything. And I can't imagine anybody who's tuned in our community not having a full month of activity during at least the weekends, during the entire month of October. Tunnels to Towers is coming through. I imagine it'll have its contingent of motorcycles behind it. I wished I had a motorcycle. And other activities, one of which I'll allude to, and that's the Machurango Museum's Open Studio Tour. Mark it off on your calendar. I don't know the exact date, probably the 3rd weekend in October. And you get to visit my studio. My shop becomes a studio, and I get to meet a lot of you. You get some munchies and to see some nifty metal art. It's always a joy to meet a bunch of people during that time. So tune in to what's happening in October. There's a lot. That's it.
Mr. Blades or Mr. Raymond? Okay, let me jump 2 more on there. I'll just announce them now, save us from later, especially since I've got some people here and hearing it. Want to invite the entire community out on Friday, October 27th for the Trunk or Treat, which is a great, once again, one of our funnest nights of the year. Come out, bring your kiddos, let them be dressed up. Many of our volunteer clubs and organizations will be out here doing it. And because we think we're so good at Trunk or Treat already, we're going to do back-to-back events. And October 28th will be Booze Off Balsam. And, let's be clear, boo, as in Halloween, booze off Balsam. And so it'll be a Halloween-themed night off Balsam here at the Kerr-McGee Center. And we would look forward to hoping that the community can join us for both of those events. Okay, next item on our agenda is our consent calendar. All items listed on the consent are considered to be routine and non-controversial by city staff. Consent items may be approved by one motion. If no member of the council or audience wishes to comment or ask questions, if comment or discussion is desired by anyone, the item will be removed from the consent calendar and be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the city council concerning the item before action is taken. There are 3 consent items, which I will read now. First is item number 4, proposed action to approve draft minutes of the Ridgecrest City Council special meeting dated August 24th, 2023. Number 5 is proposed action to approve the draft minutes of the Ridgecrest City Council special meeting dated September 11th, 2023. And number 6 is proposed action to approve the draft minutes of the Ridgecrest City Council special meeting dated September 25th, 2023. Does any member of the council wish to have an item pulled? Does any member of the public wish to have an item pulled? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Roll call.
Mayor Bruin,
Aye.
Mr. Blades.
Aye.
Mr. Heyman,
Aye.
Mr. Gorman.
Aye.
4 ayes, motion carries.
Okay, next item on our agenda is item number 7. This is a public hearing. This is the second public hearing before the Ridgecrest City Council for potential protest and vote on resolution to renew the Ridgecrest Tourism Improvement District, the RTID, from 2023 to 2033, and sunset the existing one per request of the Ridgecrest Area Convention Visitors Bureau. I'd like to begin by opening the public hearing, and then I believe we're receiving our staff report from our city attorney.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, council members. As the mayor identified, this is actually a third time this item comes before you. On June 20th, council adopted a resolution of intention. The first public hearing was conducted on June 1st. This is the follow-up public hearing following a Prop 218 notice. It's a notice to all the affected businesses, give them an opportunity to file a protest vote. The Ridgecrest Tourism Improvement District came to the city with a request to extinguish the current Business Improvement District and to renew a 10-year period for a new district at a higher rate. Managed plan for the district was submitted to the city, and as part of the record, council had an opportunity to review it. Notice has been sent, and today is a public hearing at which the council may receive any additional public comment, and also at which the clerk will advise the council if there were any protest votes, and if so, in what number. Once we determine that the protest vote was not sufficient to overcome the proposed district, council can move forward with adopting the resolution.
Do we need to receive the notice of the votes before public comment, Martin? I would believe, correct?
No, because people may come up
and
hand
choose
us
to
a
file it. Okay, thank you very much. Just want to make sure I clarified that.
Yeah, until the public hearing is open, until it closes, anybody can still.
Understood. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, having received the staff report, we'll go ahead and begin by receiving public comments. Is there any public comments that would like to be heard in regards to this item? I'm going to go ahead and ask once again, is there any public comments on the phone that would like to be heard on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council, and I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, if you'll go ahead and provide us the additional information.
There were no protests received in my office.
Okay. So once again, we've held our open public hearing and closed our public hearing. Do I have a motion for approval of the resolution establishing to renew the Ridgecrest Tourism Improvement District for 2023-2033 and sunset the existing one per request of the RACVB?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Roll call.
Mayor Bruin?
Aye.
Mr. Blades?
Aye.
Mr. Heyman?
Aye.
Mr. Gorman?
Aye.
4 ayes, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next item is item number 8. Item number 8 is also a public hearing. We'll go ahead and, the public hearing and approval of a resolution of the City Council of the City of Ridgecrest authorizing staff to submit the 2023 to 2031 draft general plan housing element and the fair housing analysis to the California Department of Housing and Community Development. We will open this public hearing and begin to receive staff report. Ms. Spurlock.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I am excited to be here to kind of present us in our last stage here of our housing element update. Tonight I have our consultant, Mr. Isaac George with Realty Planners Group, and I am going to let him take and present for you guys.
Do you want to have them sit up here? Or?
Here's the clicker.
Riley took it.
I can go get it.
Riley's got it. He said, I think he's going to click back there. Okay. You can move it
He
down
can
to
just-
your height. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council, city manager, city attorney, and staff, and members of the public. My name is Isaac George. I'm with Realty Planners Group. We are located in Fallbrook near San Diego, and we are the consultants for the city who have prepared the fair housing analysis as well as the housing element, which is also called the housing master plan for the next 8 years, and it is called the sixth cycle housing element. The council has been provided a staff report providing a decadal analysis of the socioeconomic data and demographic data, as well as a public housing analysis, and especially addressing the fair housing issues. A PowerPoint has been prepared, which will actually follow the staff report. So it is easier for you to follow that. And I would
thank
ask
you.
staff to put the PowerPoint up.
Thank you for ad-libbing. They were just trying to get it spun up.
It's not ready yet.
Yeah.
It's coming. There's none back
So if
there.
we want to take just a moment, the staff's just getting the presentation.
Yeah, we're just missing a PowerPoint. We need to have one of those graphics that says stand by.
Hold, please.
Not the whole, please, you know, the old TV standby graphic, like.
Yeah. With the dot.
We'll return to your regularly scheduled broadcasting shortly.
Sure, sir, thank you.
Station identification, yeah.
You're listening to KCOP 13, Los Angeles. That ages me.
And Rika did bring it to my attention. This is likely more our fault than anybody's because we had to cancel a city council meeting. It got bumped.
Yeah, and it got moved
It
around.
was out of the package, so.
And we do apologize for, everybody in the public who may be asking, we had to schedule special meetings unfortunately because we had some scheduling conflicts that came up and we still got the business of the city taken care of.
So, sorry, Heather.
Somebody tell a joke. Come on, Skip. No.
I wouldn't mind taking a quick survey.
I don't think Martin would like us doing that, just to be very clear.
Yeah, we're gonna get off,
not do that.
gonna get off the agenda here.
Then I won't say anything.
We should have mentioned the police open house. Thank you for that, sir. Yeah. For the community that's not aware, we have a police open house sponsored by Toyota of Ridgecrest on Friday evening. Opportunity to come down, meet, greet, involved, see our officers, and also get the chance. I think they'll be doing their canine display and a couple other fun things. And it's very, very kid-oriented. And they'll also have movies in the park at the same time that evening with Super Mario Brothers. Thank you, sir, for that recommendation. Okay.
You have the clicker. Sure. Okay. Thank you for facilitating this. The housing element is one of the general plans of the city. As staff mentioned earlier, general plan is also known as a master plan. We do have 7 mandated master plans that the city must have as directed by the state. And among all of those, the housing element is the only one that must be certified by the state Housing and Community Development Department. All the other master plans, or general plans as we call, it's up to us to have what we need, whether it's a land use element or the safety element or conservation element, open space element, and so on. The planning process for adopting a housing element for an 8-year period that we call a cycle, and we are currently in the 6th cycle, starts with typically public workshops that are arranged. And we have had a scoping meeting before the Planning Commission to determine the type of workshop that we needed. So we decided that under the auspices of the Planning Commission, we will conduct a workshop. And subsequently, we have presented the draft housing element and the fair housing analysis to the Planning Commission, which at a 3rd meeting. And the commission has recommended that is be brought to the city council, review it, and recommended that the city council recommend staff to forward it to the Housing and Community Development Department. So with the preparation of the draft housing element, it is required that we also have a public review period of 30 days, which notice was also posted for the public to be able to look at the documents and make any comments that are pertinent. The process also includes an environmental analysis, and that will happen when this document will come back to the Planning Commission and the City Council for adoption. And that happens after HCD, or the Housing and Community Development Department, would statutorily approve the document and send it to us for adoption. And subsequent to the adoption, we will send a copy of the resolution adopting the document and send it to HCD for what is called a certification. And with the certification process, we will have a legitimate, legally defensible housing element and a fair housing analysis for our community. The HCD review, as staff mentioned, emphasizes on the community workshops portion, and we have had a survey that was done by the city planner, and we incorporated those results into the housing element as well. Next slide, please. The housing element is a vision of the city to provide housing for all income groups, and that's a critical word. It addresses the needs of all income groups, and it must be administered in a manner that is affirmatively furthering fair housing. In short form, it's called AFFH, and that is a requirement of the federal government, which is passed on to the state. In fact, the state also does a fair housing analysis statewide as a requirement of HUD, enabling us to receive federal grants, which are then passed on to cities as well. The housing element must be updated every 8 years. Next slide, please. The steps in the updating of the process starts with a review and revision of the existing housing element. And then after studying the success or failure of the programs in the last 8 years, we will move on to incorporate new programs into the current cycle housing element. As part of the analysis, we perform a site inventory, that is vacant lands that is available, which are zoned properly to accommodate housing. And that particularly would look at the affordability level in the inventory, enabling affordable housing to be built. And it also has a concrete analysis of the community in terms of affirmatively furthering fair housing. Next slide, please. What is a fair housing analysis? The state requires us to have the outreach that we mentioned about and an assessment of fair housing, which includes key data and background information, fair housing enforcement and outreach capacity, integration of and segregation patterns and trends. It's not that every community is uniquely one type fits all. There are certain patterns that you can observe, racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, disparities in access to opportunity for different people, disproportionate housing needs in the jurisdiction, if any, that we need to identify, and any displacement risk. And we will go into some of the details later. And eventually the site inventory for accommodating these needs that are analyzed in the housing analysis. And finally, identification of contributing factors, goals, and actions. And these actions could be in terms of programs that we will recommend in the housing element, which the state will review and advise whether or not they are adequate, compliant with the state housing laws. When you talk about housing laws, it's a compendium of different Senate bills and Assembly bills, and some are generally categorized as housing laws. SB 9 is a different set of Senate bill that came. It is not part of the housing law, which is controlled by HCD, but it is related, and we will talk about it later. Next slide, please. We make observations of the fair housing element and the analysis as follows. Next slide, please. We looked at the demographic data as I've mentioned earlier. We have approximately 28,000 people in our community. About 64.5% are white, not Hispanic or Latino. The Hispanic population comprises approximately 22%. We have about 11,000 or so households, and of which about 60% are owner-occupied. Persons per household are about 2.52, which is lesser than the state average. This is a very small number. That means we are not overcrowding our situations. The median income of this community is pretty high. It's probably double that of the state median. We have almost 78,000 median household income. The median is the middle portion of a stretch of numbers. If you have 0 to 10, the median is going to be about 5 or so. So it's not an average. An average is a number, a collection of numbers that you add up and then divide by the total number of the variables, and you get an average, whereas here is simply focusing a middle number that you can see. We have a very well-educated population in our community, as you can see. In terms of bachelors, we have those aged 25 plus, about 32% of the people have a bachelor's degree aged 25 plus. And these are all very good statistics for a community. Next slide, please. Now we will kind of go into the fair housing indicators. Fair housing indicators look at many data points. So the first one that we looked at was the racial and ethnic diversity, and it is typically called the diversity index. And it is rated from 1 to 100. Higher diversity scores are located in the central and northeastern portions of our city, while low diversity is located in the southern portions of the city. You will also see that that kind of relates to our ethnic diversity as well. On the northwest portions, you will see that there is some poverty and issues such as that. The second index that we have looked at and calculated was the Gini index. They're also known as the Gini coefficient. Our index is generally moderate, about 0.41. If you have a Gini index of 0, that means that's the perfect community that you can have. That means there is no income disparity. Everyone is in perfect balance. Everyone makes plenty of money, and there is no issues. However, when you really compare California's, we are much better off. California has about 0.5 disparity, and Kern County has about 0.46. So compared to California and Kern County as a whole, we do much better as a community. Next slide, please. We also looked at dissimilarity index. This is the uneven distribution of racial or ethnic populations in different neighborhoods. Whether or not one particular area within the city is overly concentrated by a certain ethnic group or not. We couldn't really find any dissimilarity as is defined in the dissimilarity index. However, the following maps that I would show you show that there are some dissimilarities in distribution of different ethnic groups. Next slide, please. This is a map representing the diversity index. As we see on the northwest portion of the community, you can see some concentrations of certain ethnic populations. Next slide, please. The other variable that we have looked at is racially or ethnically concentrated area of poverty. It appears that areas of high diversity do generally correlate with lower incomes and that are of medium to low density, reflecting high income levels. We really have not really found any places of ethnically concentrated population in the town. We also looked at racially concentrated areas of affluence. There are the definition, as you can see there as it is written, there are no census blocks in the city with a median household income of $125,000 and a population that is 80% or more white. So it is a concatenation, it is connected together. It has to have a higher income, plus that also must be 80% or more white. And we don't have a situation such as that. Next slide, please. This is again a pictorial depiction of these racial segregation in town. You can see, as I've mentioned, in the northwest portion, there is some level of segregation. When you talk about segregation, sometimes people get very leery. In the olden days, we used to look at how it affected communities in general. Nowadays, cities are transforming. Say, for example, if there was a white majority city, that sometimes have changed over periods of time, becoming Hispanic or African American. So just because there is a disparity, that doesn't necessarily mean that is bad, but it is cumulatively impacting when you have a racial segregation, you have poor income, high poverty levels, and lack of facilities, lack of opportunities, lack of infrastructure. And that's what the state is trying to gauge and see how ultimately the city is trying to solve our problems, especially on the housing sector, whether or not we are resourcing everything in certain areas as impacting the other groups or not. But you will later see that the properties that we have that are zoned for all income groups are available across the city. we are not particularly seeing any kind of plan or program to avoid one group or the other. Next slide, please. Disparities in access to opportunities means that our people should have better educational opportunities. We should have better infrastructure and facilities. And overall, if you look at our community, we have moderate levels of opportunities in the community. In some communities, they really have no opportunities, like poor schools, very poor literacy rates, and that's not what we see here from the earlier demographic statistics that we saw. Next slide, please. This is a slide from TCAC and HCD combined. They have prepared it. TCAC stands for the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, and HCD, as I've mentioned, is the Housing and Community Development Department. So they created this online tool where every community can be assessed, and this shows overall that majority of the portions of the city has moderate or better opportunities. Next slide, please. Here we will talk about disproportionate housing needs. And this happens when there is a condition of overpayment or cost burdens on the population. So that could be that some tenants are paying too much rent, or it could be that there is not enough facilities to get mortgages, or it could be mortgage discriminations, a series of things that could go along with this analysis. What we have found overall, the cost burden in the community has reduced significantly compared to the 2010-2014 period, when the cost burden was about 80%. So that is a positive sign saying that the community is doing much better. Next slide, please. This is again a depiction of sensitive communities, pictorial graphics. Next slide, please. Displacement. Displacement occurs when households are forced to move because they are evicted from a building because it's getting torn down. Typical scenarios could be, let's imagine that we have a tax credit project in town which has a covenant for 55 years, and that means after 55 years, they are free to do what they want. It can go market rate. And it is probably old, maybe it's dilapidated partially, and then they say, well, we are going to demo it and build some market rate apartments. If such a scenario exists, then we will say, yep, there is a possibility of displacement, and we should have some displacement programs if this kind of situation happens. Next slide, please. We finally come to the site inventory. The distribution of RHNA, RHNA stands for Regional Housing Needs Assessment. This number is calculated by Kern Council of Governments. That is the entity that controls, not controls, but it's a union of cities and counties in Kern County. They prepare a number based on directions from the state with formulas stating, as per RHNA, how many houses should be built in our community in the next 8 years. So later we will see that we will meet the RHNA assessment for our community, and we will have enough site inventory to meet those requirements. Next slide, please. Number 10 is identification of contributing factors, goals, and actions. We kind of dwelled on this as we talked about the fair housing analysis. It basically is about assisting in the provision of housing opportunities for all, removing regulatory and financial constraints as necessary, providing adequate sites to achieve a variety and diversity of housing, and promoting equal housing opportunity. Next slide, please. We talked about RHNA in the 6th cycle, that is the current cycle that we are updating this document for. It gives an assessment for every community, including the county. And I'm barely able to see that slide and the number, but our number is roughly about 1,400 or so for the next 8 years. So that does not mean that the city has to build these houses for the public, because the city is dependent upon its own finances, and we are not builders. But we have the obligation to facilitate. That means through proper zoning and proper general plan policies, make it available for any nonprofit or other for-profit builders to come into our community and be able to build them, and therefore facilitate to build the 1,400 plus units in the next 8 years. Not necessarily that we have to, because if no one comes up here to build, then we will have nothing to build. If you really look at the last cycle, we have been able to build some, but we did not meet all the requirements from the fifth cycle. And remember, the fifth cycle deficit is not cumulative and not added on to the sixth cycle. That we don't have to do. We will just look at the sixth cycle and look at what we are supposed to build and zone enough lands for people to come and build. Sometimes cities do their own as well through tax credit projects that the city can get monies from the state, but I'm not sure what the capacity is here, because if you have tax credit projects or CDBG home types of projects, we need extra stuff to be able to administer it. It is not easy. It is one thing to apply for it. It is another thing to facilitate and manage that. Next slide, please. So now I can see our need for the sixth cycle is 1,436 housing units, and they are divided up into extremely low, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And these numbers are prescriptively given to us and said, this is what we are looking for you to accomplish. We may or may not accomplish, and we have some programs in the housing element that will facilitate, or at least it looks to facilitate, these goals. Next slide, please. Then finally, we have to say an assessment of the quantitative housing objectives. So the question is whether you want to add more. You want to say, well, we are supposed to build 1,436 housing units. Some cities would say, no, we have programs to build 1,000 more. And then in that case, we'll fill up those columns and say we will be able to build 2,000 units. But we want to be conservative, because if you don't build it, they're going to whack us, right? They'll say, why didn't you build it? Because at the next evaluation of these housing elements, they will ask us questions. Oh, you said you're going to do this. Why didn't you do that? So we have to give a lot more explanations for sometimes things that we don't want to do. And so my principle has been to conservatively assess the quantitative objectives and meet what the RHNA requires us to do. Next slide, please. This is just an explanation of what different income categories are. Say, for example, acutely low income means they are population having an income between 0 to 15% of AMI. AMI means the area median income, and this is determined at the county level. So this is how affordable housing projects would qualify people to get into an affordable housing project. There are qualification requirements as to how much you should make. So a very low income means if you make income between 30 to 50% of the AMI, yes, you would qualify for certain affordable housing. So I just wanted to bring that to illustrate that point. Next slide, please. While we do all of this, because this is one portion of the general plan of the city, anything that we do in this housing element must be compatible to the other elements in the general plan, and they must be internally consistent as well. In short, there should not be any conflicts in policies or objectives in the general plans of the city. Next slide, please. This is just a depiction of the vacant sites. As I have mentioned before, it is not concentrated in one particular area. It is pretty much scattered around the entire town, being able to offer zoned lands for the community to build. Next slide, please. We also looked at the environmental constraints like flood and fire. And this is just a map that shows, and the state can really look at whether or not there are any special environmental constraints. Say in some cities, a lot of the communities are affected by land subsidence, earthquakes, Alcos Priolo zones, then fire zones, flood zones, and we may not have that much of an impact, but some communities are heavily impacted, and therefore the ability to zone properly becomes an issue, and such cities will argue that we are constrained by many environmental natural hazards, and we really don't have the space to build the housing that we are requested to do so. Next slide, please. In the staff report that you have been provided, we have a series of programs. These programs are based on our previous evaluation of the last element, and we also added a few other programs. Next slide, please. Could you move to the last slide on this? Next slide. Next. Next. The one before. Let me go back to the number. Yeah. So we have about 16 programs that we are recommending to the state. And so what they will do is, as part of the evaluation, look at every one of these and look at all the constraints and analysis that we have done in the fair housing element as well as the housing element and say, yeah, Isaac, you have 16 programs, that's well enough. But, we see that impact or something that's not right in the housing element that you mentioned, we would like you to add one more program. And so they will say, well, here is an example of what Santa Monica did or what Kern County did. And so we kind of cut and paste that in here, and then we have the burden to monitor it and make sure that we try to accomplish that. I mean, we have to honestly make an effort to make these things happen. This is not an exercise in passivity where you can say, yeah, we have these great programs, are you happy? They will say, yeah, we are happy now, but maybe it may not be 8 years later. So we have to make sure that these programs are compliant with the housing law and compliant with the pleasures of HCD so they can recommend statutory approval and the certification. Remember, we are kind of depending on them to get this certified. So we always try to work with them to make sure that our housing element is legally defensible. It is not an obligation between the state and the city. There are so many nonprofit entities out there who also want to make sure that cities and counties comply. And in many cases, as you might know, some nonprofit has sued a city because they did not comply with certain requirements of their housing element, and they were non-compliant. And sometimes they do win. So we have to be careful and cognizant about this. Sorry about the detailed explanation, but the matter is important, and therefore it deserved the attention that was needed. And more so, this is a public hearing where the public needs to know what some of these details are, not just an exercise in presenting and approving. So that is why I have taken the time to explain what these things are. So HCD will ask us, how did you do it? How many people participated? Were there any comments? And what's your response? So we are better prepared to get this certified in due course. With this, I shall stop my report. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those at this time. And then you might open the public hearing, seek any comments from the public. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your time. We are in the public hearing now. I would encourage any of the council members that would like to have some questions. I have a couple, but I was going to let some other people go first. And does any council members have any questions?
My friend, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It's taking me a little bit of restraint not to feel defensive about some of the numbers I see up there. I'm seeing a comprehensive checklist that hopes to round out the character of the community under discussion. Would that same checklist be applied to, say, San Diego as Ridgecrest?
Yes.
I'm saying that the size of the community, specifically this one, would produce a rough granularity, such that some of the items on the checklist are almost meaningless out here. I'm sure you've run into that. Also, a particular character of this community that's not seen on anything is water. If somebody asks me what's this community's biggest problem, the answer is water. I wonder if the extent to which our aquifer is slowly diminishing and is producing some desperation among the decision makers in this valley influences at least the questions on your checklist. I'd like to see water represented somehow. That's my only observation and questions now.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. So under the number 8, displacement, so when it looks at the percent of income and rent numbers versus the percent of income and mortgage payers, do you take into consideration the additional cost that landlords may incur to have a place that's presentable and able to rent in that percentage? Basically, what I'm getting at is where it says a significant number of renters in Ridgecrest pay more than 30% of their income for rent. And that just says a significant number. While the percent of homeowners overpaying for their mortgages is less than renter overpayment for their rent, more than 80% of homeowners in Census Tract 53 seem to overpay for their mortgages. So my question is, the percent of that ratio for the renters, is it taking, whereas a mortgage, I'm thinking that is just the mortgage percent versus income. And do you take into consideration the extra additional cost for a renter? Not a renter, but a landlord.
Landlords.
Yes.
Typically, what we look at is the mortgage for your property and then find out the statistics as to who is overpaying the mortgage based on their income levels. And the other one is the renters. So either you're a householder owning your own property, or you're a householder renting a piece of property. And the rent is determined by the landlord based on their costs and overheads. So once a landlord says, I'm going to rent a 2-bedroom unit for $1,200, it's assumed that that $1,200 should be sufficient for all expenses that the landlord would expect to meet from that income. So we really don't look at how they determine their market rates or not. However, there's a caveat. Affordable housing is different. Affordable housing is determined based on the categories of levels that you are based on your income, the area median income that I mentioned. So if you are between 30 to 50%, certain types of affordable housing will say, yes, if you are in there, you will qualify, otherwise you won't. So to answer you briefly short, we don't look at the other overheads of the landlord. We assume that the landlord understands all the expenses and calculates the profit and determines the market rate rent based on their own experience.
Okay, and then how close is that 80% versus the significant number that you?
I'm not sure I have that exact statistic that we received that number from, but these are data that we derive from secondary data that's available.
I just wonder if it's close. Is it close to the 80%?
It is close to 80%.
And
so when you say 80% or more, that means it is close to 80%.
Right, because it just says a significant number, but yet it says that, 80%. And so I was curious as to how close was that 80%?
I will look at that and clarify the language just to be, so that it's more meaningful and people understand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so the other question I have is, in the quantified objectives, with the number of new construction, rehab, and the different levels, do those numbers take into consideration the new Mojave View apartments that are coming on to be rented?
We have not looked at any new apartments that are coming into the calculations for the sixth cycle, because this is an entirely new cycle, and these are numbers given to us as a prescriptive number. They determine this number and they just pass it on to us and say, these are your numbers for you to look at. But if the Mojave, I'm not sure about the status of the Mojave apartments. Are they under construction at this point?
Yes, they'll have occupancy this week, so.
Okay, so what we will do is, based on the issuance of the building permit and the dates, at the end of next year, we have to do what is called an annual progress report as to how the housing element has done for the first year. So we will, based on the date of the permit, we will add that as already having been accomplished towards the sixth cycle.
And that answers my question. So it would reflect into the sixth cycle.
Yes, it will reflect in the sixth cycle. Yeah.
Very good.
Because there's a cutoff there.
Okay.
Not to interrupt you, Doc, but in simple terms, we're already ahead on the next cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a cyclical process, you see. I mean, nothing is static. Every city is building. Some cities always have a ton of projects. And so we kind of look at and say, well, what was issued in the prior cycle? What's being issued in the next cycle? And we take credit for that.
And so my last question was, and I don't see it in the notes here, maybe it was on the presentation, but when we look at the moderate income housing requirements, so as a city, does it create a negative relationship with us or the city and with the California Department of Housing and Community Development if we provide more attention toward increasing moderate income housing? Because those numbers show that we're in need of, housing in that particular aspect of our housing requirement, or not, well, requirements or needs. Because I guess you could look at it, I mean, it seems like the housing department looks at racially and low-income individuals as their priority. But people in the moderate income could be disparaged also if there's not enough housing to provide them the opportunity to rent or buy also. And if those numbers are higher, does it create a negative impact on the city for us to be looking at focusing on that when the next cycle comes around?
True. Councilmember Heyman, the numbers that we saw there, the low, very low, moderate, above moderate, they are all determined by the Kern Council of Governments based on a certain formula that has been given by the state to all the COGS, all the Association of Governments or Council of Governments. So they hire consultants like me, but I'm not qualified to do such a study because you need an economics background to be able to do that. But some consultants are hired to prepare these numbers, and then they are verified by ACD and becomes final. Your point is well taken that although these numbers are there, that's a theoretical assumption that we will build those. In some cases, we may not build half of what moderate housing that might be needed in our community. And in that case, yes, it is true that the moderate income community would be affected by that, but that's what the market determines. So it is not a finite thing that you really can say whether it impacts one group or the other. It is based on a theoretical modeling that they come up with these numbers. Whether we accomplish or not, that is a different issue. Okay. I hope I've been able to answer you.
Final question is, what is TCAC?
TCAC stands for the Tax Credit Allocation Committee. Remember, I showed a map and said this is derived by TCAC and HCD. They are the Tax Credit Allocation Committee. They often give, in short, we call them TCAC. TCAC gives lots of funding for affordable housing to cities. They are competitive grants, very difficult to get, but there are millions and millions of dollars available to TCAC.
Okay, and where in the presentation does it show that the Track 53 has a low median household income and low TCAC scores? I was trying to find that when I read through here, but I didn't see the TCAC score for Track 53.
It's from one of our statistics. I don't recollect exactly where that came from, but I'll be glad to provide you that information specifically later.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify something? So for the RENA numbers, because I think when you were talking about the median moderate income and above moderate, if you look at our RENA number, the largest need, so the largest number of units that we had to produce or make available for production was those moderate income and above moderate income. And so I think that although we do spend a lot of time talking about the fair housing analysis, because that's important, because we want to make sure that we aren't, impacting populations in our community negatively. Obviously, the larger portion of what our anticipated needed is for moderate and above moderate income. So although we do go through all of the ways that we're not, segregating portions of our community, obviously the state still wants to see that we're meeting housing for all community members. It's not just low income, it's all community members, that we're providing an opportunity for housing to be built for every segment of our community. And based on those RENA numbers, the largest portion is the moderate and above moderate.
Right, and that's kind of what I see it as too. Thank you.
Heather, I had one question. There was a slide in there, and I was just wondering what the data was compared to. That is, it showed a disparity in access to service, and I noticed that it was yellowed out in that one area, and I just want to know what is that compared to? Like, what is reflecting that?
So that's probably the most interesting thing in this whole process has been Census Tract 53, because if you look at it, all that is the former Weary housing or former military housing, and the entire cutout is the single family.
Sure.
So, and that's it. That's the only residential that's in that whole census tract. So that leaves us with the disproportionate, obviously, because that's all multifamily, and it's just a small portion of our community. But that's a census tract, and that's what the numbers are based off of.
It is. I'm just curious as to what constitutes a lack of service, lack of access to service. Because if that's something that we need to be focused on, then that's something I'd like to be focused on.
Well, and that's a lot of the block grants that are improving Leroy Jackson Park.
Sure.
And that is improving services for those community members. So,
Well, no, I
Yeah.
know. I know. What I'm digging at is
There is
there has to be a
no-
perimeter. There has to be data. There has
Yeah.
to be.
So there's no, as far as services, I mean, if you, in a general kind of term, if you think there isn't any, there's no commercial in that kind of area that you would easily access, it is disproportionately multifamily, so you're gonna have a lower income group, you're gonna have possibly a lower education group.
I'm just saying, there's a school not that far away, but I don't know,
There
there's not a gas station or this and that and the other. I just didn't know if that's perimeters, or is it parks, or is it hospital, is it a?
It's just everything.
Hey, Heather, can you characterize the housing element report? Are there any negative findings in that report that we should be concerned about?
No, I don't think so. And I think, all the programs that are in it are programs that we're continuing. As you guys are aware, you've seen many code updates from me, and those things are addressing the regulations the state has passed down to us in order to fulfill our obligations to make housing more accessible to everybody. And we have been on top of that, and we've been ahead of that. So, and we will continue to be. I don't think there's anything surprising other than the boundary line for Census Tract 53.
Right. Okay, and that's just how the data fell out. And that's what I took from the report as well. I didn't see anything glaring. I just wanted to, we're just all nitpicking to make sure that if there's something to uncover, we uncover it. Thank you for a large amount of effort in this, because I know it was a lot of work. You put forth a lot of yourself in this, and I appreciate everything you've done to get us here.
Thank you.
May I?
And keeping us up to date with, moving forward, and because this reflects a good state of our plan, and I give you a lot of that credit. Thank you, Heather.
So it'd be true to state that we're on track with our housing element.
Yes. I mean, the worst that can happen is for the state after review will say, yeah, you are missing, according to SB 333 or SB 9 or something, we don't have a program that you must have. So what typically happens is immediately after your authorization to submit this, we will very likely have a pre-consultation meeting with ACD staff and city staff. And in that, they will give us probably some informal points and say, yeah, you were missing this or you were saying this. We are not sure about it, as Councilman asked here. You stated this, but it's not very clear. Can you make it clear? And they will ask us to kind of update that before they give us their formal first comment. Then they have that is the 90-day comment period. Then we can respond to it, and then they have another 60-day comment period where they can give us comments again if they're not very happy about it. But we try to iron out these, and so the worst that can happen is that we will probably see a few more programs, just like any other city gets it. Now, I know you mentioned about the accessibility issue. All the data is pre-analyzed by the state. We do not pick and choose a particular statistic in order to come up with that result. So in other words, this is a graphical program where you go and put City of Ridgecrest, it immediately will show what the census tract-wise disparities are. So we just look at it, and exactly all those maps are printed right off that software. Sure. And then we kind of explain, this is what we saw.
I respect that it's a report. I just wanted to dig down on the data, because if we see an issue, how else can we address it? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I have a couple very quick ones. First, I want to just describe for the public transparency. We brought up Mojave View, and I'm, okay, it's in the 6th cycle. That's really important. I think what's also important is for the public to jump in the time machine and go back to 2019 to understand when Mojave View was presented to the Planning Commission and was presented to this council. At that time, there were questions raised about why do we want this type of housing? Why do we want these type of people? That was raised by some of the council members at that time. And I want to stress that because this is exactly where we are obligated under state guidelines, under the housing element, to provide avenues for those to be accomplished. So when we're approving a project like Mojave View, understand that we're exchanging land that the city owned, that we're exchanging that land to the developer in order to build those units that are required under our housing element direction, and that therefore, when exchange, we are able to then access either state tax grants, state tax funds for the development of those housing units, and also then that developer is under an agreement to provide that affordability housing for a period of time. And it sounds like we're going over something that maybe people have heard before, but understanding the simple A to B to C to D, why this happens and what the purpose of this document is very important. This document guides the city's actions as it relates to acquiring, developing, or improving housing within our community, so that we are applying it equally and that we are ensuring that affordability access and that the access needed for our community is being addressed.
Absolutely.
Okay, so wanted to make sure I addressed that one before I got to my real simple one, which is, I look through the goals, the 15 goals that are at the back, and, two of them stand out to me. One is because I'm honoring my good friend, Solomon Rajaratnam with, why would we continue to have a goal that says we're going to establish by 2016?
That should be an error.
Okay. So Solomon, you heard me say it. Thank you very much, my friend. I think there's actually two in there that indicate that the goal will be established in 2016.
Yeah, and that must be one of the programs that we are continuing.
And that's what I would assume, and that's why I
Yes.
was raising that question. And the second is specifically number 14, which is the special needs housing. And I wanted to raise from a larger perspective basis. I understand that this plan gives us a lot of leeway to look and to examine without being committed to, which is great, which gives us the room to have that discussion. But I also know that the state of California very clearly is driving municipalities and organizations into requirements for providing special needs housing, and more specifically homeless shelter and those types of facilities. At this time, we're not obligated to have any specific programs as it relates to homelessness. I just want to make sure that I've clarified that from a program perspective, with the amount of pressure that the state is applying, that I'm clear on that.
Yes, Mayor Bruin, I should categorically state one thing, that there are already certain laws as part of the state housing laws that mandates that we do certain things automatically. Say, for example, certain types of shelters must be permitted ministerially without any conditional use permits or other kind of authority whereby we would not allow it. Those kind of requirements are coming to us as the mandate of the people of the state of California. So there is no argument there. So there are many state and Senate bills that have come through which has become law where it is mandated. So for example, when you really look at multifamily housing, affordable housing especially, all those multifamily housing projects are ministerial, streamlined, and we do not really have so much to say. We can have a design guideline with specific design input and not discretionary, subject to, yes, I think this may be a good idea to have. No, very specific criteria must be in that design guideline or that requirement. So there are so many different, a myriad of housing laws that are there, which already mandate so many things that we must do. If you look at one of the programs, we have added a few zoning code amendments. Right. All those zoning code amendments are basically stating that we will amend our code compliant with all those housing laws we may have seen or missed as of January 2023. And so we are already saying that we have to be compliant.
Okay.
You also mentioned that we may not be committed. Yes, in fact, when we adopt a policy, we are committed to accomplishing it. But if you cannot do it, they're not going to penalize you. If you create artificial barriers to those accomplishment of goals, then the state can say, no, you have done something wrong, and that affects closing down our building department, not being able to issue permits, right, not being able to get grants and things like that. That's the downside of it.
So the key element there being, assist or support applications when feasible, which makes
exactly,
sense.
yeah.
And then evaluate whether that such a program is
Right,
which makes sense.
nothing requires us to spend general fund money to build anything.
Just wanted to address it.
We just have the entitlements.
It's a hot issue. It's something that the state continues to create mandates for local. SB 1383, anybody? They create mandates by law that then we have to deal with 5-6 years sometimes down the line, and I'm just clarifying that that's not at a mandate state as of yet for our community. Okay, not yet, being the opportune term. Okay, I have no further questions. Is council okay for me to go to the public? Okay, I'd like to go ahead and ask if there's any public comment on the housing element, if there's anybody who'd like to share anything. And sir, if you'd mind, if you want to come over and take a seat here with Heather,
the public would comment from the podium, sir.
Sure.
My turn.
I didn't see you.
It's okay. I'm easy to miss.
I saw you at the first meeting. Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, let's go up there. Tom Wicknick. Had a number of questions that come up, and then I forget them. Anyway, Mr. Strand kind of hit on one of my questions is the city meeting all these state mandates? Are we meeting, or have a deficit in some of the mandates when it comes to low-income housing and everything like that? And my point here is that, social media in Ridgecrest just lights up when you start talking about low-income housing, you know that. And on both sides of the issue, of course. So are we meeting requirements? Are we have a deficit, or where are we in that area? Are we meeting state requirements?
Yes, the state requires that we consider all applications and that we have the available land for any projects and the available land to meet the potential RHNA needs. And so we do meet those now.
Okay, so we're not running a deficit or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Which is a good question. A lot of cities in this cycle had a huge problem because they don't have the available vacant land. So we had over 5,000 sites or units of land available for housing, and our RHNA was only 1,400. So we do not expect to see a need in the future to rezone like other cities were pressed with this cycle.
Okay. And we were quick to adopt SB 9, EDU, and everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, do we still have a pure R1 zone district?
That depends on what you mean. Yes, we have an R1, correct. However, the state does permit duplexes, and it permits lot splits through SB 9 and 10.
Do they have a square footage minimum requirements on R1 when they start doing something like that?
No.
I think it has to do more with the setbacks and everything. the
Yeah, you
size.
still have to meet the setbacks on the property.
Okay.
So then it just depends on if they can make that work with the, as you probably know, the 20-foot and the 5 and 10. So if they can still fit, which we have seen in the Heights, we have seen duplexes on those single-family vacant lots.
Yeah, I've seen that. Okay. Is there anything in this that considers, I know I heard some numbers about affordable housing and things like that. Is there anything in there that considers, are we meeting the requirements that somebody would say our housing is too expensive in an overall generic definition? And I have to say something like where some of the bigger cities are saying, hey, you gotta do this so we can lower the cost of housing for these groups. And like, I don't know, anybody saw this week on TV, they just showed, I think 4 cities in California where they're establishing new housing, and it virtually is a building with almost looks like half a sea container, room for a single bed and a chair. This thing's not even 6 feet tall, it's about 15 feet long and the size of a twin bed. And it's $900 a month. And they share a common area for a kitchen and living room. And that is the whole emphasis of that, is to get affordable housing at $900 per month in this particular, Sacramento, San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles. I think these are the cities they mentioned that the state is trying to make them build this type of thing. Are we having any kind of disparity as far as the cost of housing that might affect something like that?
I think the city attorney actually he was ready, sitting on go
Either
to.
way, if you have it, Heather, that's fine.
Or you, Heather?
Our RHNA numbers are well below our available land, which is, in my experience, unusual, frankly. And it's a very good thing in order to be able to provide the availability for anyone who wants to build in the city. Also, moderate income housing is our highest need, the largest number necessary. So I don't think that the concerns that you mentioned would be applicable to our city.
Okay, so as far as our cost of housing, it meets the requirements, and we're not going out there trying to find a way to, I don't know how to say it clearly, but to lower it just to meet another income bracket, other than low-income housing, that type of thing.
The city's obligation under state law is to make sure that there's available land zoned correctly for to meet the RENA numbers that were assigned, which we have, and also that our development standards are objective and that we don't have artificial barriers, for lack of a better word, which would be used to block any type of a project that's moving forward. And as the gentleman mentioned, we are in the process of looking at the codes and making sure that they're in full compliance with the new state laws, and those amendments will most likely be coming to the council at some point in time.
Okay, and I'll close out with, Mr. Gorman asked a question of the gentleman here about water, and I didn't hear him answer you.
Well, water has nothing to do with this. Yeah. Nothing to do with it
There
at
be
all.
no consideration to housing requirements
Zero.
based on availability of water?
Zero, it's
state
not in the
does
code.
not.
State doesn't.
The state does
not-
not consider anything for the groundwater,
For this report.
for RENA numbers, no,
But then they come down with.
across the state.
Well, then they come down with the committee that Scott Hayman serves on and says, yes, you will. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other public comment? Okay, is there any public comment on the phones? We'll give it one moment. The phone number is up on the screen. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. Is there any other final council questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Is there any other information to be shared prior to the vote?
No, just thanks, Heather. I know it was a lot.
Thank you.
You put a lot of effort into it.
Yep. Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of the resolution of the City Council of the City of Ridgecrest authorizing staff to submit the 2023-2031 draft general plan housing element and fair housing analysis to the California Department of Housing and Community Development?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Roll call.
Mayor Bruin,
Aye.
Mr. Blades.
Aye.
Mr. Heyman,
Aye.
Mr. Gorman.
Aye.
4 ayes, motion carries.
Thank you both for your time. We appreciate the presentation.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay, next item is item number 9. Item number 9 is a resolution to amend a professional services agreement with Wildan Engineering in the amount of $32,500 for the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Improvement Project to include additional design efforts for the Felspar Norma Detention Basin. Quinn.
Hey, Quinn.
Good evening, Mayor Bruin and City Council. First of all, let me reintroduce myself. My name is Quinn. I'm an engineer for the City of Ridgecrest. All right, let me get to the specifics of the amendment. Tonight, staff is requesting the City Council to first amend the professional service agreement with Wildan Engineering for professional services for the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Improvement Project. Allocate an additional $32,500 from the Drainage Impact Funds to the previously authorized project budget of $578,021. Authorize the Finance Director to amend the budget to reflect all appropriate capital revenues and transfer account to amend the purchase order of the amount of $32,500 for a total of $610,521. Last but not least, authorize the City Manager to execute the amendment. All right, as you guys are aware, just over a month ago, the city received a substantial amount of rainfall due to Tropical Storm Hillary. We received approximately 5.5 inches of rain within a 48-hour period, classifying this as a 1,000-year event. Some parts of the city, the record-setting amount of rain overwhelmed current facilities, causing flooding and damages in the process. The City of Ridgecrest previously entered into an agreement with Wildan to provide professional services for the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Improvement Project. The original scope of work included construction services, bidding support, and all typical items normally required for the development of plans, specs, and engineering estimates. In the light of the recent flooding, staff feels it's prudent to encompass all drainage infrastructure improvements in this area within the project, thus recommending adding an additional design service to the project to address this need. The current design facilities only consider minor surface improvements, such as minimal runoff for a storm that can be classified as a 10-year occurrence. Example of this was the Felspar Basin. The Felspar Basin is designed for a 10-year occurrence. So when we got the Hillary, we got the tropical storm, Obviously, the basin couldn't handle the excess amount of rain. It overtopped and it flooded our street, Felspar and Helena. The current design facilities, okay. Staff would like to evaluate a 50-year and 100-year event that can be accomplished. This has the potential to reduce and remove approximately 250-plus homes from the 100-year flooding. We're all aware that our drainage infrastructure has not gotten the attention it deserves for the past 25 years. Staff feels it needs to change. The project will be the first of many that we would like to complete within the next 5 years to better prepare should we ever receive this type of rain again. With this project, we are slated to spend some $5 million on improvements. Staff will potentially like to add about another $1 million of future drainage impact funds to the project so we can better serve our community. Staff recommends the City Council to approve this amendment. Amendment number 1 agreement and authorizes the city manager to execute the agreement with Wildan for $32,500. This design construction project will be funded by a combination of state grant and local funds. With that said, that concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions you guys may have.
Well, first, thank you, Quinn. And, let me start by complimenting the Public Works Department because I just want everyone to see this is October 4th, right?
Yes.
This event happened 45 days ago. We are already recognizing, identifying, and taking action towards corrective steps from what we discovered, right?
Correct.
And that was the Felspar Lake, okay? Anybody who drove around for the week after saw the Felspar Lake, right? And we know that people on Felspar and Helena and some of those neighborhoods were impacted. Just the amount of total water was simply more than could be handled. So my understanding is this is simply us being proactive in recognition of some new data that we've been shared with as a result of 5.5 inches of rain to say, let's make sure we did it right. And this is gonna address that area between Mojave View and the residents that were affected by the flood, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. With that said, I have no questions. This makes perfect sense in my book, so I'll let any other council
Yeah,
members.
it's a logical move. No questions on my part.
I just want to say I was here for the flood we had in '84 and looking at how the city fared with this flood. Public Works has done a great job in mitigating some of the flood issues that we already have, as the mayor said, and I really like the idea of preventative maintenance, and I think that's where this comes into play and looking ahead, because we're probably going to have another one, who knows when, but I'm glad to see this being done.
Any questions, Mr. Gorman? No? Okay. Having heard council comment, is there any public comment in regards to the issue? Hearing none, I will once again ask for if there's any public comments on the phones. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to council. Do I have a motion for approval of the resolution to amend a professional services agreement with Wildan Engineering in the amount of $32,500 for the additional design efforts on the Felspar Norma Detention Basin?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Roll call.
Mayor Bruin.
Aye.
Mr. Blades.
Aye.
Mr. Heyman.
Aye.
Mr. Gorman.
Aye.
4 ayes, motion carries.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you guys for your time.
Next item on our agenda is our committee reports. We had a very mixed up September with meetings, so we do apologize. Some of these reports are almost a month old. So the first one would have been the city org meeting from 9/7. City org continues to monitor and report on the status of the implementation of SB 1383. We did hold our third trash town hall during the month of September. We also are actively working on the community banners program. There'll be some more information on that tomorrow at the upcoming city org meeting. But anything else I would share is already 30 days old, and so with that, I would say we would love for you to join us tomorrow evening for city org at 5:30 p.m. right here, same bat channel, same bat location. So
I'll just add that trash town hall actually was pretty useful. There was a lot of in the weeds questions that the public was throwing at us, how to separate stuff, how that was actually working out. Some details that I think that sometimes people just don't feel like they get all the information, and I was happy to provide that. Waste Management was on site. Of course, our city staff was there, so it was good. I thought it was actually a useful meeting, and I'm always happy when that's the outcome, because meetings are not always useful.
And I will reiterate that, again, for our citizens, we remain available for questions in regards to 1383. We continue to be available for, if you have challenges with service or something that has gone wrong, that we stand ready and willing to help and support in that process as we continue to all adapt to 1383. Did you have anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Gorman?
Not really. The value of having it all happen a month ago, to me, is that I've completely forgotten it.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask. I wanted to be polite, but we're meeting tomorrow. We'll get all caught up tomorrow.
I'll take notes.
Okay. Next committee meeting is the Finance Committee meeting. This is also 20-some odd days past.
I don't have my notes.
You don't have your notes. I don't have my notes, but this is what I would tell you what Finance is currently working on. We asked our Director of Finance, Shuri, to get updated bond numbers to make sure that the bonding was still in line with the changes in interest rates, to make sure that it was still projected, and she provided us at least 3 different possible scenarios for the bonding. This would be the bonding against Measure P for the construction of the new Penny Pool. We were presented 3 different options in terms of how to possibly structure the bonds, and we provided some discussion and recommendation on what we thought was probably the most cost-effective with them to still bring the formal recommendation to the council at a future date once the design process is completed and we have a opportunity to begin the bid process, and we will begin the bonding. The other thing we reviewed was the changes to the city's investment portfolio. Again, for those that are unaware, we have taken a significant portion of our wastewater reserve funds and other funds, and we have placed them into short-term investments in order to increase the overall yield for the city. All of those funds are still 100% guaranteed and not into any type of risk investment of any kind. But we are getting a better yield, and that's actually providing minor funding for additional things. I think I shared before, in one quarter, we saw about a $50,000 increase in our just general funds from being able to invest with a more, I guess I would call it a fundamentally sound investment strategy than letting it just sit in an account.
I'll add that the sales tax and Measure V, Measure P funds, property taxes are all coming in at or slightly higher than past years' time. So we're sitting good overall in the general fund and overall funding coming in.
Our year-end general fund, from budget to actuals for fiscal year 22-23, I believe we had an excess of about $900,000 relative to what we had pre-budgeted. And the bulk of that was from Measure V. And we are beginning to see more wide acceptance and implementation of Measure P. So the funds that may be lagging from implementation are getting caught up, and both funds continue to be very important. It is important to note that state sales tax, the 1% state sales tax, has been in decline and continues to be in decline relative to year-over-year expectations. And that's on the basis of understanding that internet purchases that are routing through after the Wayfair decision remain a detriment to the local sales tax base. The only protections we have are the 2 1% measures that protect those funds directly for the city of Ridgecrest. Okay, RACVB was canceled. Infrastructure was canceled. Economic development?
Yes. So the Economic Development Committee, I'm sure people usually want to know the updates, like when's Habit Burger coming and things like that. Well, it is coming. They broke ground. Jersey Mike's will be just adjacent to that. Town Place Suites, tentatively Q1 of '24. And then we went over some routine items and then received a presentation from the Economic Development Corporation on their strategic action plan for sustainable air services. And what the effort is to get the momentum and garner support for getting air service back into this, at Inyokern Airport and for the community at large. It was a good presentation by the EDC. I came away from the presentation personally in full support, and I'm sure at some point it'll be a conversation here at the council. And I'm open to questions from the council at this point. It was I have the slides as they were in hand. And it was extensive, so I don't think you want me to just drill down through the presentation, and it wasn't my presentation, so I think that would be irresponsible. But if you have any questions on the information I received, I'm open to those.
I would just say, I don't have any questions, but just I want to reiterate for the public, if you have an active interest in working with a group on restoring air service for this community, the IWV EDC is taking the champion's position on it. I know that, I'm sure that they would appreciate hearing public input or ideas on it, and they're not ready for, it's not coming out to the public yet for how it's coming together yet, but.
No, maybe not, but there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done for something like this. The community's been through an iteration of air services, what's worked and what's not worked, and the people involved, of course, the EDC, they're very aware of all those and all the precursors. So there's got to have to be consultants talked to, reports created, but making sure all the stakeholders are on board and everybody's moving in the right direction. Because the overall goal that it's nothing new, but we all should be very aware that quality of life and economic development tend to walk hand in hand. And so that's just one element that's being recognized here, and something that, of course, we internally discuss all the time at the city and the city staff level. So that was a topic of discussion at the Economic Development Committee. And
Actually, Mr. O'Neill will be at Chamber of Commerce next Tuesday, making this presentation to the group.
And I believe he was going to brief the RECVB as well. Okay. Nothing further from the Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, sir. Next committee is Parks, Recs, and Quality of Life. We met yesterday. Unfortunately, we did not have a quorum, but we just had I call it a spirited vomiting session where we just talked. And it was good. We had members of the public here to be able to ask some questions. The city remains focused on our two major quality of life projects. The first being the Clean California Leroy Jackson retrofit growing project of, I don't want to call it the growing project of doom, but I don't want it to sound bad. We're really excited about it. But the Clean California project has several extensive pieces now into it, including the repair and retrofit of the tennis courts, the installation of the new bathroom, the fencing, there's the walking path, there's the trash enclosures. There's a lot in this program that is going to be a lot of transformative work into the Leroy Jackson Sports Complex. That project continues to be moving forward as a priority, and we hope to see that going to bid here in the next 30 days or so. You gonna offer an input?
Yeah, we actually spoke to the consultants this morning regarding the tennis courts, and we were able to come up with a decision on how to fix the courts. So we should be hopefully out to bid in a week and a half.
Perfect, and we hope to see that project break ground here. If we can get the bidding and the process going, that we can get that started by the spring of '25. That would be fantastic. And then the other one, obviously, is the design and process for Sergeant Penny Pool Project. We are planning or working towards having another public meeting to be able to give the public an update on where we're at. The brief explanation of where we're at is we continue to get design elements, and we continue to work through those design elements to ensure that the facility that we propose to build meets two critical expectations. One, meets all of the critical expectations of what the community wants for a pool project, and secondarily, that we do the project properly from the get-go. And that means that we are making sure that when we're thinking about it, we're not just thinking about throwing a hole in the ground and putting a pool in, but rather, how can we use this facility to promote community events? How can we use this to coordinate with other events in and around the area? How can we use the facility to coordinate with our seniors? How can we use the facility to be a beacon for improvement within our community? The project remains a 3-pool project. And we are currently now doing some quick design adjustments to address the gap between the senior center and where the pool facility will be constructed to ensure that the entire area is properly developed at the same time. That will probably push a few other projects that have been discussed at Quality of Life, including the retrofit of the expansion or possible playground addition to the Freedom Park area. We aren't abandoning those, same as the ball fields, we're not abandoning those. They simply are, we're making sure that we want to be focused on these 2 projects over the next 6 to 9 months so that we ensure that we deliver the projects on time and in accordance with the public's expectation. I hear all too often a number of people say, well, I haven't seen the pool break ground, so it must not be happening. I assure you, I reiterate to you, and I promise you that this pool is coming, and we have actively been working on it aggressively. It's hard for me to show it, but trust me, it's happening, and we'll be having another public session so that the public can see where we've progressed in now the architecture, and hopefully by that time we'll have some of the interior renderings and some of the other things to be able to put the better picture on it, and it won't look like it's in the forest, okay? Promise we won't do that again. Any other things that you'd like to share, Skip?
None beyond my admiration for you. You described that very well.
Thank you. Okay. Next is other committees, boards, or commissions. Any other boards, commissions, reports?
I'm sure I have something.
Well, you have at least the,
I have Air Pollution Board.
we have Cal Cities too.
Tomorrow. Oh, yeah, I guess I could brief on Cal City, sorry. It's been a month. So I had the opportunity, be our representative. Mr. Skip Foreman was my second in Sacramento for a couple of days with the League of California Cities. The purpose of that is to take up initiatives. The League of California Cities is our lobbyist, so to speak. None were taken by the last day, but what you do the rest of your time there is attend series of classes, some of those with lawyers teaching them in attendance, some of them on land zoning, various things that any municipality would want to take up, all education for either city staffs or representatives. It was a full week. I took a lot out of it. I attended as many classes as I could that would fit into the calendar, and I was proud to be your representative.
Thank you, sir. Any other boards, commissions? No? Okay. Next, city manager report.
Yeah, I think we settled on a date for the community Christmas event. We're looking at December 8th on a Saturday. So staff will be working with Parks and Rec.
Friday.
Friday to December 8th. We went back and
You
forth on
almost
that
had
day a little
Narissa
bit.
climb out of her seat in that moment.
Sorry, Narissa. Anyway, so staff's working on the event. I think it's going to be a great community and kids event. So we'll be getting that information out as that program's developed, so we hopefully get the community interest in that. Other than that, that's all I have.
Just to share, anybody who's been to the tree lighting over the last couple of years, we've been improving it year over year, and this year we have another big improvement coming. So all I'm going to say is, if you've got a child or a kid and you really got that Christmas bug, I promise you, December 8th will be a fantastic evening at the city if you want to be part of it, between Santa Claus, probably many other guest appearances of winter characters, and last but not least, we're hoping to put together a very fun interior winter festival maze for the community that they'll get a kick out of. So again, trying to make those great youth events opportunities, especially during the holiday season. So we hope to see you there. Future agenda items. Any future agenda items?
I don't know if this falls under agenda items or council comments, but with the, last year there was some brief discussion on the Winter Wonderland event, I think out at the fairgrounds. And so I think it entailed trucking in snow and having a, like a sledding event and like a Winter Wonderland for kids. And I thought it was a good idea. I don't know if there's been any other discussion or if any other council members have heard anything about it, or if it's something that we're still possibly looking at.
There was a thought of maybe bringing snow to our event, but I don't know. They're still discussing that. But I think the other Winter Wonderland event, I think, is being run by somebody else and maybe heading a different direction.
Yeah, that's the last I heard too.
That's what I was. I believe there is a third-party group that may be working on a separate event that's not city-sponsored or city. I don't want to say not city-supported, because I'm sure if it's a great event for our community, we would offer the support. But it's not being fiscally organized or put on the backs of our taxpayers.
I think we're looking at an event that, whether it has snow at it or not, where we're looking at a lot of activities for the kids. We're really trying to make it a significant community event. We deconflicted it with the event that the base is doing the week prior. I think staff is really going to work to try and make this event very well and hopefully well attended. So whether we have snow or not, I don't know, but we will have things that kids will like to do.
Yeah. And it all goes back to the focus that we've been talking about, which is to have events that are unique and also are great for the community. And we've been able to accomplish that this year. Any other future agenda items? Okay. Mayor, council comments. We'll go ahead and start. Mr. Gorman, I'm going to let you be the first.
I become less loquacious as the clock marches on. I want to say I got a lot out of the League of California Cities convention. What do you call that get-together up there? Conference. It was a delight chatting with other members of communities, perhaps our size, perhaps even smaller, mayors and council people and city managers and city lawyers. They were always the most fun. And getting a snapshot of ourselves, how we look to others. The first question, I won't go into that, but it was delightful as far as, especially for me, I desperately need the orientation it provided. And I was proud to tout Ridgecrest as best I could. That's it.
Well, I just want to kind of go over, there's a lot going on, and it's really, it's nice to see the city having so many different events that are taking place. I'm just going to kind of run over them again. We've got the Navy Ball on October 20th. We've got the Desert Empire Fair on October 20th and to the 22nd. And, another shout out for Chip and Holloway in the fairgrounds for the Tunnel of Towers, which is going to be on October 8th. Well, let's see. October 18th is kind of the start, but it'll be at the fairgrounds on those days that it's opened. We've got the Trunk or Treat on October 27th and the Booze event on Balsam on the 28th. We got, the police open house on Friday the 6th, this Friday. We got Jersey Mike's coming in, the pool's on task, and, listening to everybody's comments and input. It's pretty exciting to see all this going on in the city, so get out and enjoy yourselves.
Yep.
Blades.
Yeah, the staff is working at beyond full tilt.
Yeah.
The city staff is, every time I even start to approach some of these department heads, they're like, Yeah, come on, man. Like, you can only do so much. I'm joking because I've never been told no. Every time I talk to any member of the city staff, every time I talk to a department head, they're just all about making stuff happen for this community, and I appreciate it deeply. As part of my comments, I didn't get a chance to ask Mr. Ron Strand during his section. I would like to, for the public, make sure, because we have, as the mayor states at Carmageddon, how long do we expect that construction to go on?
I would say into the middle of November. In all honesty, they haven't started digging the trench yet. They've just done the sewer bypass, and they should be breaking ground here shortly. And to be frank with you, we have really no idea when they start digging that 22-foot deep hole what we're actually going to find. So we're planning on at least middle of November.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Yep. Understood. And then I also wanted to add, so Mr. Hammond, you summarized pretty well a lot of the stuff we have going on. A little bit further out, November 4th and 5th, that's the Petroglyph Festival. And then I wanted to just finish off with my appreciation for, thank you for letting me read the Proclamation for Constitution Week. It's something that I think we could all of us do well to remember, to spend time to dwell on. It's I'd hate that we ever forget the sacrifices of our forefathers, the framers of the Constitution, and thinking back to 1776 and all, and where we are now. We've progressed a lot, and hopefully we continue to move forward with the right spirit, and we're not progress for progress' sake, if that makes sense. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, you guys covered a couple of them. Thank you very much. I had petroglyph written down, so I'm going to line that one through, and I have just two comments. The first was wanted to reiterate, for those that don't know, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, I believe is the proper term for it. I'm not sure if I have that exactly correct. But that program is now part of our Kern County Library System, and it will allow families to apply for and receive one free book a month for their children. And I just would encourage you to take that opportunity. If you're out there, if you have a child, especially, there's no greater power that you have with your children than to take that moment and read to them, especially if they're a younger child, and helping their both education and their development. Not only that, it also creates an incredible bond between you and your child, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of this wonderful service that's came to our community. So if you haven't, take a moment to check out the Dolly Parton Library, Imagination Library, and I believe that there's a link on the Kern County Public Library System if you're interested. The second one is, it's no secret that I have had and hope to continue to have a nearly 20-year friendship and relationship with former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and that the events yesterday, while absolutely are part of the political process that we pride ourselves as Americans and as holders of the Constitution, I do want to say that it's a blow to our community. There's no way to not understand that the prestige, influence, and an effort that Congressman McCarthy had made in all those years of securing that leadership position was good for Ridgecrest. And it was going to be good for Ridgecrest into the future. And the loss of his leadership role within the Congress is, it's something that's unfortunate, and it's something that is a setback to our community. But it's also something that I believe we can all say that Congressman has continued to represent our community through all of these years. He's continued to always have the best interests of his constituents and his communities. And I'd just personally like to say that I'm equally saddened by what has occurred, but I will continue to move forward because the best interest of our community always is when we're working forward rather than working backwards. So my thoughts to my friend in Washington, and with that, I will adjourn our meeting and look forward to seeing you again on the 18th. Have a wonderful evening.